Now, as the world prepares for the inauguration of the US's 47th President, Donald Trump, on Monday, the leaders of the BRICS countries are anticipating economic pitfalls. Trump has pledged a 100% tariff against a bloc of 9 nations if they continue to undermine the United States dollar. Tariffs are a central part of Trump's economic vision, which he sees as a way of growing the US economy. But the tariffs threat holds negative global economic consequences for the BRICS bloc, particularly South Africa. Our reporter Latashia Naidoo brings us more on the potential impact of these tariffs on the local economy. Latashia, good to speak to you this afternoon. Just what is it that South Africa and some of the BRICS countries would be wary of when Donald Trump steps into office tomorrow?
Good afternoon, Hugo. Well, we'll know that this was a key point in terms of President Donald Trump's elections campaign in 2024, stating that a 100% tariff would be imposed on BRICS nations, that bloc of 9 countries, should it replace the dollar in terms of international trade. Now, the dollar is used as the world's reserve currency, which is attributed to 80% of world trade. And this has cemented the United States as a global superpower, giving it significant advantages and establishing it as a geopolitical force. Now, the BRICS nations have come out and said that Washington is using this as nothing more, using the greenback as nothing more than a political tool. And imposing these tariffs on the BRICS nations will have global resonance and negative impacts, particularly in South Africa. We know that in 2018, during Trump's first presidency, he imposed a 25% tax on the steel industry, which continues to have negative impacts on the industry in South Africa. But 7 years later, if that imposition of those 100% tariffs is applied to the BRICS nations, there will be significant pitfalls for South Africa's economy. But here to tell us more about the consequences of such is Professor Martin van Diersberg, Head of Economics at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. Martin, we know that the US dollar is a global superpower in terms of trade and industry. We also know that 100% tariff imposition on the BRICS nations, in particular South Africa, will have very negative consequences for our economy. What could the potential of such look like for the South African economy?
Thank you. Thanks. I think dire consequences. One has to look at the impact of tariffs. So tariffs, and Donald Trump, as we know, has threatened throughout his campaign tariffs 10% across to all imported products into America, to China up to 60% tariffs on imported goods from China. And then what you've just mentioned now, the BRICS countries, potentially 100% tariff. If you think of the impact that would have, obviously it will increase prices by those tariffs, which means massive world inflation, inflation in the American economy as well, because whatever products are still imported into the country will then be increased by those prices. So firstly, inflation. Secondly, it will naturally reduce demand for those products because of the high prices, therefore reduce production, therefore reduce GDP. So ultimately, coming back to South Africa, it will result in decreased demand for South African products, which means unemployment, idle capacity, underutilized resources in terms of factors of production. So dire consequences. One has to obviously look at to what extent will this be carried out, because we also know China is a major player within the BRICS nations. We've seen Donald Trump's confidant, Elon Musk, is very invested in China, seriously invested in China. The Tesla, I think they sell more than 50% of all Tesla sales go to China. There's a mega factory in China. He's got another big factory planned, apart from all his other investments in China. So I think one has to, the consequences, to answer your question, would be dire if it happened. Would it happen is the next question. And then hence my discussion around perhaps Elon Musk, who's his financial advisor, clearly, whether official or not, because it will have significant effect on Musk's businesses as well.
We saw in November last year when Trump was announced as the new US president that the rand actually weakened. But in the run-up to tomorrow's inauguration, the rand has strengthened. Is there any correlation with regard to how the markets are equating South Africa and the US economy?
I think the markets have largely already played out. So I think when the news came that Trump was president-elect, I think the markets reacted. I think there is a lot of nervousness. We're volatile. We're an emerging market. There's a lot of concern around interest rates at the moment, where we expected significant reductions in interest rates. There are now new factors implicating the fact that we might not see those significant interest rate reductions. The bond yields in the United States have improved, so there's been a strengthening of the dollar, hence a weakening of the rand in recently. So there's a lot of different factors. The actual inauguration, I think, yes, there's a lot of nervousness. And we go back to what you've just said. Will these threats, let's call them threats, that he made during the campaign in terms of tariffs, etc., to what extent will it disrupt the global international trade?
Thank you, Martin van Diersberg, Head of Economics at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, giving us some insight on the potential of what a 100% tariff imposition on the BRICS nations could look like, stating that it does hold dire consequences for the South African economy, South Africa as a key player within that BRICS bloc of nations. But whether or not these tariff impositions will take place, we'll have to see within the first term or so of Donald Trump's new presidency. And that's something that we're going to be watching as the South African nation, I expect, Hugo, with bated breath.
Latashia, Naidoo speaking economics for us ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration tomorrow. Appreciate your time.